Hello everyone, my name is Ryan Kinchin. I'm with High Desert Math Tutor, and today I want to talk to you about multiplying binomials. Now, a binomial arises when you have two numbers or variables that are being added together. When you're multiplying two numbers like this, we usually put them in parentheses, and we call that multiplying binomials. But before we can understand completely what we're doing here when we're multiplying binomials, we need to take a moment to talk about the distributive property. So distributive property. So what the distributive property tells us, say we have something like 2 times 7. Well, 2 times 7 is 14. Say, though, that instead of writing 7, we put 2 times 3 plus 4. So 3 plus 4 is still 7. Now, we can actually multiply this right here without adding 3 and 4 first. Now, the process for this is we're first going to multiply 2 times 3. Then we're going to add that answer to 2 times 4. Now 2 times 3 plus 2 times 4 is the roadmap for what we're doing. 2 times 3 is 6. Plus 2 times 4 is 8. And 6 plus 8 is 14. So we get the same answer. And that's a demonstration of what's called the distributive property. So more specifically, when we have things we're adding together and we choose to multiply them by a certain number before we add, that's called distributing this number into the parentheses. Now, taking a step back and looking at this larger problem, these are two numbers, albeit that there are variables here. At some point, that variable is going to be a number. And we want to multiply these before we can add these numbers and subtract these numbers. So we're going to have to use a version of the distributive property. So I'm not going to walk you through necessarily the reasons that this works, but I'm going to show you how to use this property to multiply 2x plus 3 times x minus 5. So we'll start with the roadmap. The first thing we're going to do is multiply the first number by the first number. So that's first 2 we're multiplying. Next, we're going to multiply the first one and the last one, so the two outer numbers. Next, we're going to multiply the two inner numbers. And finally, the two last numbers. Now I'm writing this down because it's common for people to remember this by remembering FOIL. So you'd say that we're going to FOIL these numbers. So we're going to start with 2x from right here times x. So 2x times x. Next we have 2x times 5. But notice 5 is actually negative. So this is going to be 2x times negative 5. So plus 2x times negative 5. Next we have 3 times x. 3 times x. And finally we have 3 times negative 5. So plus 3 times negative 5. Okay, now we need to actually carefully multiply these numbers and variables and make sure that we deal with the exponents appropriately and the plus and minus signs appropriately. So quick reminder, so I'll write this down over here. So remember, 3 times 3 can be written as 3 to the power 2. because we're multiplying a number by itself, and there are two of them. If we make this more general, instead of talking about 3, what if we talk about the variable x times the variable x? Well, that is x to the power 2, or x squared. So we need that for this simplification. So right here, we have 2 times x, which is same as 2 times x squared. So we're done with that. Next, we have 2 times x times negative 5. So positive 2 times negative 5 is going to be negative. Positive times negative is negative. 2 times 5 is 10, but we still have the x. So we have 10x. Next, we have 3 times x. They're both positive, so this stays positive, 3x. And finally, we have positive 3 times negative 5. So positive times negative is negative. 3 times 5 is 15. Okay, we've done most of the work. We're almost done, but there's one more thing we need to do now. But let me give you a little bit of terminology so we can talk about this. So you see how we have these pluses and minuses? Anything separated by a plus or a minus, these things are called terms. So they're called terms. And a term is anything separated. Let me get a little more space. Anything separated, by a plus or minus. Anything separated by a plus or minus is called a term. This is only important for us because we want to talk about what's called a like term. Now, a like term, if we look at our 4 terms here, a like term is any term that has the same variables, but those variables also have to be raised to the same power. Okay, so a like term is a term, well, let's say like terms with an S. Like terms are terms that have the same variables raised to the same power. Now, just notice that there's no variable with this minus 15 term. So technically, any term that has no variable would be a like term with this one. So the reason we care about like terms, you can only combine terms if they're like terms. So let's see, which terms here have x raised to the power 2? The only one we see is this first one right here. So there are no other like terms, so we're officially done with this one. So we can cross that off. Now let's look for like terms that have x by itself. We see we have 2 terms here. So this is the same as saying we owe someone 10 x's because it's negative. So we owe someone 10 x's, but then we're going to give them 3 right now. So if you owed someone 10 x's and you give them 3, you still owe them more x's. So we're still negative, but we only owe them 7 x's at this point. So that's how we can combine those x's. And finally, the minus 15 term is by itself. There are no other like terms, so we're just going to copy down minus 15. And this is our final answer. All of these terms are as simple as they can be until we know what x is. And since we don't have any like terms at this point, we can't combine these any further. So, quick recap of everything we talked about. What we're doing in this video is multiplying binomials. And these are called binomials because there are two numbers or variables that we're either adding or we're subtracting. And bi stands for two. And we're doing this using the distributive property because we are multiplying before we explicitly add or subtract. Now, when we have two binomials that we're multiplying, we do that by foiling. And FOIL stands for first, outer, inner, and then last, which was the process that we used when we were multiplying for our map. We did the first, outer, inner, and last. Finally, we had to know what the word term means so we could know what it means when we say we need to combine like terms. And combining the like terms was when we took any term with the same variable raised to the same power and we combine those into one term. All right, so I hope that's helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to post them down in the comments below. And if you want more videos like this, please be sure to like this video and subscribe.